All right, guys, welcome back to the NLF Coaching Podcast. I'm Coach Nate.
And I'm Coach Will.
Today we're joined by Jeff Alberts. Jeff is a natural bodybuilder and coach. Been doing this for about 40 years. So Jeff's got a ton of experience as a competitor, as a coach, and balances that with fatherhood and business. So we thought Jeff would be a great guest to bring on today. So Jeff, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about kind of how you got started in the fitness industry.
All right, I'm Jeff Alberts. Got started training way back in 1986 as an 8th grader, middle school, and I never stopped since. Just been consistent the entire way through. Got into competitive bodybuilding in the early 90s. 93 was my first show. Since then, I've just been competing, on and off through the years, and competing now as a 55-year-old. As far as coaching, got into coaching about 17 years ago when we started 3D Muscle Journey. Prior to that, I worked in an auto plant here in California. Before it was Tesla, it was New United Motor. When that plant closed down, it was like, okay, what do I do now? And it's like, well, I'm pretty good at this bodybuilding thing, so I guess I'm gonna coach with 3D Muscle Journey. And that's basically kind of the gist of it.
Wow, that's crazy. And Jeff, you said your first show was 1993, which I was one, which is just incredible to think about how long you weren't even alive. So it's crazy to think about how long you've been doing this, the longevity. Obviously, I feel like natural bodybuilding is really starting to gain a lot of traction. A lot of people are starting to go the natural route. What was it like back in 1993? I'm sure not many people do it. What kind of got you into the natural side of things back then versus, obviously the enhanced side?
Yeah, I didn't know. I mean, I've been lifetime natural, but I didn't know natural bodybuilding as in shows existed when I first started. I started out in the AAU Federation, and it was non-tested back then. So you can tell there was a mixed bag of athletes. Some were enhanced, some weren't. It wasn't until the late 90s when I learned about you can actually do these shows that are natural, and that was in 1998. My first natural show was an INBA show in Oakland, California. I did that show. It wasn't the best of experience that I had. Just the quality of the show wasn't all that great. From there, I kind of learned about the NGA, so the National Gym Association. So that was in 99, I did what is now the WNBF Muscle Mayhem, California Muscle Mayhem. Back then, it was at Capital City. And Bob Bell and Tina Smith were the promoters of that show, and now they're the owners of the WNBF. So I've known them since the late 90s. So that was kind of my first introduction into natural shows, and they promoted a really good show. It was their first time promoting too, and it was well ran. It was probably the best ran show I've ever done. And I've done the AAU, I did NBC, I did the INBA show leading into that. But their first time promoting, I was like, wow, these people have their shit together, for lack of better terms. So that was kind of my introduction. And back then there was no internet. So I didn't really have access to the information that we have now. I didn't you kind of just learn about shows with flyers on your gym wall. That's basically how I learned about shows back then. So my very first show was like, oh, there's a show in 6 weeks. I can do that, without really having any type of knowledge of how to contest prep or how much weight I need to lose and those types of things. So it was definitely a much different time back then. The quality of athletes nowhere near what it is now. And I attribute that to just basically the lack of information or the speed of information that we had back then, which is kind of cool to see the evolution. Because like you said, probably the last 5-10 years, we've seen natural bodybuilding just kind of explode. My first WNBF World Championships in 2014, there was 22 countries there. Now there's over 60 countries represented at WNBF Worlds. So the talent pool has exploded, it's really cool to see.
That's awesome. So one thing I'd like to touch on there in regards to you starting in the 80s and your first show in the early 90s, obviously that's kind of pre-internet era where the internet's kind of just getting started, late 90s. So the wealth of knowledge back then to now, the access to information now, it's night and day different. How have you seen, and how has your approach changed from when you first started to now in terms of how you approach your own training, your own bodybuilding journey, and kind of how you coach your athletes? Because obviously there's so much more access to the science and data and like how to approach things, and things evolve, and we kind of find things that we like and try out things on ourselves. And what's changed for you over the decades?
Like back then, the only information I had access to was like Flex Magazine, Muscle and Fitness. So the Muscle Mags, you know, I had a couple of books, but all of that was catered more towards the dark side. So a lot of the things that I was doing was things that aren't very conducive towards a natural athlete, especially with contest prep. You know, it was just like, okay, 12-week prep. That was kind of like the typical thing. You just diet for 12 weeks. So it wasn't like you need to lose 20 pounds, 30 pounds, or 15 pounds or whatever. It's like you just diet for 12 weeks. So setting up my trajectory and timelines wasn't always too ideal because I was just following what these magazines were saying, like just the blueprint was a 12-week prep. Peak weeks, you know, cutting water, cutting sodium, like doing, and all this again is more catered towards the other side of the sport, which I had no clue about, but I was just taking what I knew from there and applying it. And the thing what's crazy is that I had some pretty good success early on. You know, I wasn't winning overalls, but I collected quite a few class wins. And when you're winning, you think you're doing things correctly, you're doing things right. So basically, I just kept doing what I always did because it seemed to be working. Now in hindsight, I'm like, well, if I would have like used the information that I have now and applied it back then, I would have found even more success early on. But I only knew what I knew. And I only knew what I was exposed to. And it wasn't until I met Bob Bell in the late 90s where his background was more on the natural side. You know, he had access to like Dr. Joe Plumzinski and, you know, all these types of guys that are in the science and in the know. And, you know, I had competed in his show, and then I was going to go to Oregon to compete in a different natural show to actually go for a pro card because I didn't know pro cards existed back then for natural athletes. I'm like, oh, cool, I can actually do a pro card thing. So he called me up out of the blue, and he just was like, hey, we're 6 weeks out from it. You know, what are you actually doing with your protocols? And when I started explaining to him how I was doing things, you know, he was like, okay, maybe you should add in a little cardio. Maybe you should track your food. You know, instead of just weighing things out with measuring cups, let's actually put things on a food scale. Let's not cut water, because I was telling him how I usually peak and all that type of stuff. So I was stubborn. I didn't want to listen because I'm like, I had all this success. Here's this guy I don't really know. He's trying to tell me these things like are totally opposite of what I typically would do. So it took a little while in that conversation to kind of break some of my walls down. But once I did, I'm like, okay, let me just try what he's talking about. 6 weeks later is my best ever physique, like a big change. And I didn't get a pro card. I came very close to it. It was like, okay, you know, there's a lot more for me to learn. And having that humility is what really kind of like changed the game for me. Because I think sometimes when we first start out, you know, if we find a little success, we just get hard-headed and we kind of just rinse and repeat that. We're too fearful of trying something different because we're like, hey, this thing's working. I'm not going to change it.
Yeah, 100%. And you make a great point about the cutting water, because I did my first show, I think it was 11 or so years ago, and my coach then had me cutting water as well, because it was it was still kind of the thing that a lot of people were doing. And even still to this day, there's still people that are still doing it at the natural level. And you can just see the difference with the flat and stringy look that they have. You know, they might look great going into peak week, and then they do that during peak week, and they look way worse on show day than they looked the week before, you know?
Yeah.
So it's interesting that kind of, you said in the late 90s, people were saying to stop doing that, and yet there's still people that are doing it now.
Yeah, it's great. Like that, man, guys, I got some crazy stories. So I would dehydrate myself for like 2 days. Like I would literally drink maybe 3 or 4 ounces with a meal. And that was it. And then I would lay out in the sun because I'm like, okay, I got to get tighter. And my ex-wife at the time would be like, please just drink. Like she'd beg me to drink water because my nose was literally caving in. Like I just looked like a damn skeleton. And I was like, no, I ain't doing it. It's gonna ruin my look. But now, obviously, it's like dehydrating myself, like you said. It's like that ruined my look. I was flat as shit when I look back.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you think about like beef jerky, that's what I look like. I look like a piece of beef jerky, dry as shit and flat. I mean, and like now, obviously, you hydrate well. You have plenty of carbs, plenty of sodium, and it's like, man, your physique comes to life. You fill out, you look hard and grainy. So it's a totally opposite look from what I used to do back in the day. It's kind of mind-boggling to think now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jeff, so I'm curious about the origin of 3DMJ. Was that so? Obviously, after the plant closed down, you decided to go all in on your coaching, your passion for coaching, and start that journey. Was that when 3DMJ started, or how did that team come about?
So in 2008, so after my 2006 season, I was kind of like burnt out because I was competing on and off since the early 90s, and I was one of those guys that was very obsessive about the sport in my 20s and 30s, like hardcore, very competitive, like far from what I am now. Like a lot of people know me more as like the balanced guy with humility, but it wasn't always like that. Like when I was in my 20s and 30s, I was very hardcore. Ask my ex-wife, she'd probably tell you some horror stories, like how my mentality was. And I just burned myself out. So after that, I was like, I'm done. I'm retiring from that. I'm not going to do this no more. I just got burned out. In 2008, I started getting the itch again. But I knew I didn't want to approach competing like I did in the past because I knew it wasn't healthy at that point. I'm like, okay, this is not healthy. And I wasn't very friendly at shows. I wasn't mean, but if we're backstage and you try to talk to me, I'm not talking to you. I'm here to win. I'm here to beat you guys. I'm not going to talk to you guys. I'll talk to you after the show's over with. But during the show, like, nah, I'm just highly competitive. I didn't want that mentality. So in 2009, when I started that prep, my ex-wife tried to talk me out of it because she's like, it's going to get ugly like it always does. I'm like, no, I got a different mentality. It was more about fun, more about the journey itself. And my ex-uncle-in-law, who was a doctor, he's like very adventurous, does all these crazy things. He's like, you should put yourself out there and start a blog, just share your journey. So that's where 3D Muscle Journey started. It was just my own personal blog that I just post up once a week because back then, the internet wasn't constant like it is now. So I would just post once a week my training, a couple of pictures or whatever, talk about the week, and that was it. And then fast forward to the shows I did, I met the other guys at 3D Muscle Journey, Eric Helms, Alberto Nunez, Brett Loomis. We formed bonds backstage, and we realized there was a gap here on the West Coast as far as information, because back then, like 2009 era, the East Coast was more so like the natural bodybuilding community, because you had New York, you had like the Hercules and all these big shows out there. But here on the West Coast, it was kind of small, and the information was lacking. So we're like, hey, let's bridge the gap. So we basically started to coach. Officially play like the start of 2010, and we launched that with sponsored athletes. We took 2 athletes, gave them free coaching, and then kind of the rest is history from there.
That's really cool. So one thing I want to kind of highlight and then go a little bit more in depth in, you said you were able to kind of change your mindset in the mid 2000s from like being this ultra intense, super competitive guy to kind of shifting into a more like realistic, balanced approach with how you go about your bodybuilding competitions. Like, what was the driver for making that transition, and how did you kind of go about that? Because I think that's an area a lot of people struggle with, the all or nothing mindset with bodybuilding.
Yeah, I coach this all the time, every season. I coach this with newer athletes, even intermediates. It's probably just evolved from competing from 93 all the way up until like the 2009. But I'd say 2002 was probably the darkest competitive season I ever had. I was all in for a pro card. I had my sights set on just one show, and that was the INBF Texas Shredder Classic. So I was like my first time traveling a decent distance. So I knew I was going to be putting a lot of money into it. So that prep was, I was so perfect with it. I didn't cheat on my diet once. I did. The only thing I missed one cardio session because I went to a basketball game, an NBA game. But outside of that, like I was money. Everything was rock solid. And I just remember after each day I would question myself, like, did I do enough? Like, never feeling content at all, like never fulfilled. I would go to bed saying I could have did a little better. So it was like that for 14 weeks. That prep was 14 weeks, rock solid. Fast forward to the show. Again, that mindset of like, I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to compete and win. Didn't really, socialize too much backstage. I ended up taking second place, and I lost by 1 point. I had 4 or 5 first place votes. I had 2 seconds, and I had 2 fifths. So the fifth was like, where's the fifths coming from? And then what reinforced like the belief of like I should have won. A bunch of people in the audience, you should have won, blah, blah, blah. I had a couple of judges tell me that, like of all people who probably shouldn't say anything like that. I had 2 judges tell me like, I don't know what happened. You should have won. So I just remember that plane ride home. I was not angry, but I was depressed. My mind was like, I just put all that work into this for second. It was I got depressed. And then literally when I got back home, I had wanted nothing to do with bodybuilding. And I went into a dark hole for about a year. And then in 2004, my brother at the time, because we used to compete together, he's like, let's compete. Let's do a show. And I'm like, I don't want to do it. I'm done. And he's like, come on, just do it for me. So I did it, but it was like a 9-week prep. I lost 27 pounds. I just crash dieted to it, and that was not a pleasant experience. I mean, I'm glad I did it for my brother, but outside of that, it just was dark. And it took me literally from like 2005 into 2006 where I actually go, okay, let me compete again. And it still was more of the same in 2006. It wasn't until like 2007, 2008 where my mindset started to evolve. And I like, okay, this is like, it just wasn't a pleasant experience. It wasn't enjoyable. Yes, I was successful. Like I brought shredded physiques to the stage and I, placed in second. Now in hindsight, it's pretty damn good. But I didn't see that at the time. I was too clouded by the competitiveness, by ego. And it just evolved. Like the 2 years of just like kind of just doing some soul searching and then getting that itch to do it again. But I knew I needed to change that perspective and that mindset. I needed to find fun. I needed to find enjoyment first and foremost. So that was the theme of that 2009 prep, was have fun, still work hard. And what's crazy is like I came in better shape and ended up winning 2 pro cards without having the obsessive competitive mindset. And I met now what I call my family, my brothers, 3D Muscle Journey. I have a family now outside of my own family. So I have 2 families. That would have never happened prior to that. So it was a valuable, like it sucks I had to go through all that. Like my whole career, I've learned the hard way. I feel like I'm always like learning things like way later than I should. And I think that's the reason why, and not to, be overly confident, but I feel like that's the reason why I'm a pretty good coach, is because I've gone through all of that. Now, when I coach my athletes, I have not just the science stuff behind me, but I have so much experience because I've been in the trenches. I can relate to just about everybody. And I can almost guarantee I've probably experienced things 2 or 3 times over to maybe someone else who's just experiencing it for the first time. So that helps to relate and to help guide athletes in a better way, while they're going down their own path. So I can make their journey a little bit easier and better, more enjoyable. And yeah, that gives me a lot of reward. Knowing those dark times, like it's definitely helping other people out now.
That's a great point, Jeff, because I feel very similar. And it's almost sometimes like it's a rite of passage. Like you've got to compete a few times to actually learn that, you don't need to obsess over it every minute of every day. You train, you eat your meals, you sleep, you recover well, and you check the boxes on the right timeline. And bodybuilding isn't who you are; it's just a part of what you do. But what people tend to associate bodybuilding with is just suffering, right? So yes, it's extremely difficult when you get down to those really low levels of body fat. There's going to be things that occur that you can't do anything about, and it sucks. But what people will try and do is just make themselves suffer as much as possible, as if the judges are going to say, hey, how much did you suffer to get to this point, right? And that's not part of it. There's no scale on stage. There's no you suffered more than the other person, so you win. It's purely about who looks the best for the criteria on the day.
Yeah.
You find that too?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all, maybe you guys have or haven't, I don't know. But like for me, it was, hey, I'm working harder than anybody else. I train harder than anybody. I diet harder than anybody, so I deserve to win. That's just ego. Like to think you're the hardest worker in the room all the time, or you diet the hardest. Is like, I guarantee you, there's like tons of people out there that are working just as hard, if not harder than you. Unless you're Michael Jordan, like, okay, it's like,
right.
Come on, yeah, right. So it's like, yeah, I had that mentality. Like, you get to a show, like, I deserve to win. And then when you don't win, it's like, what is there? Like, define your success after that. You can't, because you're just so blinded by your own ego. So now when I do shows, it's like, I always have like a list of purposes. Like, what is my purpose? What are my whys? What do I define as successful? Because back in the day, it was more like giving that power to the judges to define what is successful for me by a placing. And that's just, to me, it's like crazy now when I think about that. It's like, it feels great to win, like to get a first place or to win a show. It still feels awesome. It feels rewarding. I still try to do that, but I also have other perspectives on what success is. It could be a better look than I had last time. It could be like, you know what, I treated my wife better at this prep than I did the last prep. That's a success. There's just so many different ways to look at success. And what I've learned, this is probably more in my 2014 prep. I remember doing the IFPA Pro International. I told myself the week of the show, like, I'm not giving that power to the judges. Power is mine. And I'm not even going to look at the judges. I'm going to look at the audience, because I'm performing for the audience, not the judges. They're the ones paying the tickets anyways. So it just freed my mind up from like trying to have a certain placing. And what's interesting is I won that show with that mindset. So every time I go into shows a little bit more relaxed and having deeper perspectives than just actually winning, that's where I found probably my most success. So when you do win, it's like, oh, this is like a bonus. It's like a cherry on top of the sundae. But yeah, this sport it's 24/7. Like any other sport, you play basketball, you practice for 2 hours, then you go get a burger and fries afterwards, you're good. But bodybuilding's 24/7. Food, cardio steps, training, like anything you do in the social world, it's like you're thinking about how is this going to impact training and all this stuff. So it's nonstop. And if you're focused on it 24/7, then yeah, it's probably gonna negatively impact something in the real world. So it's learning how to turn that switch off and focus on other areas of life. It kind of like, it's when things outside the gym are in good harmony, usually the gym's going well, and when the gym's going really well, then you're a happier person outside the gym. So if you can balance those things out, you'll find more success.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you just can't put a price on experience and skin in the game. It makes you a better athlete and a better coach. And obviously, I think when your mindset's in a better place with how you're approaching your prep, I think you can just bring a better look, because you're just not as stressed about the day-to-day things. You're kind of just like, well, I'm going to do what I need to do. I'm going to check all the boxes, and the outcome on stage will be what it is. Like, I can only control it so much. And I think that's such an important thing that you can't really rush that, because I think as competitive people, like, you're naturally going to feel that way the first couple of times you compete. Is like, it's an all or nothing mindset. But the longer you do it, I do think that you just naturally kind of lower some of those like stressors in your prep by like just being more realistic with how you approach it. So kind of transitioning from that, obviously we know you're a family guy and you make some content and talk on your podcast about like the balance side of things. Like, how do you approach balancing like competitive bodybuilding, business coaching, and being a family man? How do you handle that stuff now versus maybe 10 to 15 years ago? How's that changed?
Am I allowed to swear on this podcast?
Sure.
That's fine.
Okay. So back 10, 15 years ago, so I'm married the second time. So my wife now is a totally different vibe than it was with my ex-wife. My ex-wife and I, like, we got married straight out of high school. So we didn't really know who we were as people. Like, in hindsight, like, hey, we probably should have never got married that young. So it's like, getting into that type of marriage early on out of high school, the maturity level wasn't there. Then I'm into this competitive bodybuilding thing, hyper-focused, I'm obsessed. Straight up just an asshole, just a selfish asshole, just straight up. And, going through, like you said, just all that experience, years and years of kind of rinsing and repeating the same things and kind of seeing the relationship kind of go its own ways, not strictly just because of bodybuilding. That wasn't the main reason. It didn't help, I give it that, but eventually we kind of just learned we need to go our own ways. So, you know, now with my wife, now it's like I give her space to be who she is. She gives me space to be who I am. So there are some sacrifices both ways, because there's some things she likes to do that I don't like to do, and vice versa. You know, it's not fun for her to sit at a bodybuilding show for like 10 hours, you know, and I'm up there for like 10 minutes. So she has to wait. So it's not always fun for significant others. So understanding that, I try to be as balanced. Like during a prep, it's like, okay, let's do a date night. You know, it's once a week, once every other week. It's kind of easy to plan meals around that. Okay, let me just lower some calories down prior, create a buffer. I can go out, and then when I'm actually with her, I'm not pulling a phone out and tracking my food. You know, because I think sometimes we're a little obsessive. We're pulling our phone out, and then we start talking about our prep and our food on this date, which, you know, they don't want to talk about bodybuilding while you're on a nice romantic date. So I just be mindful of that, be respectful of that. So those types of little things. And obviously when you get very lean, I'm sure you guys are prepped. So, you know, like your libido kind of tanks out, and your priority isn't reproduction. Your priority is like, I want a cheeseburger so I don't starve and die. So I think sometimes when we're prepping, we get too involved in ourselves and we get selfish, and we think our significant others or even other people around us need to be really understanding of us and cater to us. But in my opinion, it should be the other way around. It's like we're the ones choosing to do this. So if this choice means I'm going to be tired, I'm going to be irritable at times, hungry, I'm not going to have like any type of drive or libido, then I need to make sure that I'm putting on happy faces as much as I can and being more present, especially for my son. Like, I don't want to be a zombie, you know. He wants like an energetic dad. So I try to do I'm not always perfect, but I'm aware of it, and I try to be as good as I can with those things. It might mean like, okay, I'm going to get my wife's coffee in the morning, or I'm going to leave her a little note. So if you're emotionally connected, that can lead to more physicality. Or even when you don't feel like it, initiate it, because it's obviously it's an important part of the relationship. So that's all about the balance. And sometimes too, when we choose to bodybuild, we choose to prep. Yes, it's hard. Like you were mentioning earlier, it's hard, you know, especially when you get super lean, you're tired, but think about it. It's a luxury to make the choice to bodybuild. Because the way I look at it is there's other people in the world, different countries that are in war-torn countries. They don't have a choice. They're hungry. There's no food available. So there's food scarcity. So here we are, we're choosing to eat less food, but yet our refrigerators are full of food. So it's like, when I look at it from that perspective, I'm like, I'm not really suffering. Yes, it's hard, it's challenging, but I can end that anytime I want. So from that, that makes my prep easier when I am going through the darker times of it. It's like, okay, this isn't that bad. So I think sometimes like our mentality around it, like that suffering gets glorified a little bit, or I'm hardcore because I'm suffering. It's like, to me, it's like, no, you're not really suffering. You're hungry, yes, but you're not starving. There's a difference with that.
And it's temporary. It will end.
100%. Yeah.
And, I think I love everything you said there. I think a key word really is like be intentional, right? It's like we're intentional with our food, we're intentional with our training, intentional with our recovery. So be intentional with our relationships too, you know. And it's very easy to fall into like that victim mindset of woe is me. It's like, well, hold on a minute. You are actively choosing to do this yourself. You are not a victim in this situation, because it's like the Navy SEALs, you know, when they're in buds or whatever, there's a bell. They can ring the bell whenever they want and they're done, right? And it's the same in prep. Whenever you want to ring that bell, you can quit. Nothing is stopping you. Yeah. So if it's that bad and you hate it that much, stop putting yourself through it, you know?
Yeah.
Bodybuilding isn't for everyone.
I was an asshole back in the day. Like, I remember my ex-wife, let's go out to dinner, or I remember her grandparents came in from Florida to California, and we're supposed to go out to dinner as a family. I'm like, I'm not going. She's like, what do you mean you're not going? I go, I can't eat, so I'm not going. So I didn't want to put myself in that environment. So it's like, because I'm prepping, then therefore I get a pass on it, which is ridiculous now when I think about it. I ended up going, but I was irritated and I wasn't engaging. I wasn't being my normal self. Like I was just upset because now I'm being forced to be in this environment because it's not prep conducive. So those are the things that I went through to get me onto this side. Or it's like, now it's like, if it really comes down to, I got to go out to eat with the family and I can't eat, it's like, okay, it's really close to a show. I can have a Diet Coke and still interact, or I can have a Diet Coke and a salad and still interact and be happy. It's how I choose to perceive the environment. So it's like, it's all a choice. But sometimes it is, or even now, there are times where it's like, yeah, I get irritable and my wife will call me out on my bullshit. Like, you're being a little too irritable. I'm like, okay. And sometimes at the end of prep, you know how we go for judges' feedback. What do I need to work on? Because it's like, oh, you need to improve your shoulders, your conditioning, your posing, whatever. Like, most judges are going to tell you the same thing anyways: get bigger, pose better, those types of things. It's all the same. But no judge is going to tell you need to work on your relationship better when you're going through prep. So who's the perfect judge for that? Would be your significant other, or your other family members you're around, or even your friends, co-workers. How was I? How did I do? And you'll get the real truth there. Because as a coach, when I coach more, like go to these local shows and I see their significant others and we're just, casual conversation, I'll learn more about the athlete through their eyes. Because during the coaching process, the athlete's only going to tell you what you want to hear unless you ask questions, which I do, but you don't always get the full truths when you're prepping somebody. But when you talk to a significant other and they open up a little bit, you're like, oh, okay, now I really know. And trust me, like, there's no perfect bodybuilder when it comes to the balance thing, but it can be worked on. So if you ask people around you, like, how was I? What do I need to work on? From a human being relationship perspective, you'll learn a lot. You'll gain perspective, and that'll make you better the next time you do it. Because it is a hard process to go through, for probably more so for the people around us than us.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. It's everyone that's close to you is also making the sacrifice, right? Because they got to deal with your ass.
More so. Yeah, more so. Part of the recovery process, because we always talk about recovery diet, gaining weight back and all that stuff. Like, no, part of the recovery process is like, maybe you need to spend a week with your wife or your husband and go on vacation. It's not like, oh, I'm going to reverse diet and increase my carbs by 25. It's like, no, why don't you go on a vacation with your significant other because they sacrificed like the last 6 months for you. Yeah. That's recovery.
Yeah, I think that's something that like younger competitors, like as coaches, we deal with this probably more with the younger competitors. Once you have some more veteran athletes, they start to get this. But I think it's like that all or nothing mindset feels so important when you first start your bodybuilding journey. But as you've done it long enough, you start to realize, oh, we can plan in some meals or some like social events throughout like your prep, and you're building out some like prep timeline. They can have a wedding where they have an off-plan meal and things are going to be fine. Like, I think that's a part of like the process that like younger athletes can't really comprehend. But once you've done it long enough, you realize that it really is important and often beneficial for your physique to kind of add those things into the prep.
Yeah.
You said it. You hit the nail on the head. Like your significant others are really taking the prep head on, just like you are. Like, they're going through the same experiences and adversities by your side, and you're choosing to do this. So like, they have to deal with it.
100%.
Yeah. While we're on the topic of food, Jeff, a lot of people initially are extremely obsessive, right? Tracking every single calorie, everything they eat, which in prep is obviously still very important to be tracking the majority of what you eat and getting those measurements down. As people transition into an off season, or even as people say, I'm done with bodybuilding, how do you coach them out of being in that obsessive mindset to incorporate more, I hate the word balance, but a more balanced lifestyle that allows them to be social, to enjoy foods without feeling the guilt or stress of eating what's not on the plan, per se?
I try to have athletes have the same habits whether they're prepping or not prepping. The only thing that changes is the amount of food you're eating. So if you guys are talking about, if you're balanced during a prep, you're flexible, meaning you've got the date nights every once in a while, or birthdays or whatever, and you're working it all in within your prep. there's no reason why you can't do that in the off season. Because the only difference is you're eating a little more food. That's the only difference. What ends up happening is people go through, and this is probably like to your point, it's more like beginners and intermediates. They have the all or nothing mindset. It's like, I'm prepping, it's this way. I'm not prepping, now it's this way. And usually what it means is when you go from prep to off season, it's like, oh, okay, handcuffs are off. I can go to Domino's and I can go to like Burger King and all these places. So they have a list of restaurants they want to hit up post show, instead of realizing like, okay, all we're doing is just eating a little more food. So I think just keeping habits and a structure in place it's important. That doesn't mean you can't enjoy life, but if you don't have a routine or a structure in place when you're not like more rigid bodybuilding, kind of contest prep we're talking about, then yeah, that's when people go off the deep end. And then now you're 30, 40, 50 pounds over your stage weight. So, and again, this is something that I've experienced firsthand for many years. I would prep, do extremely good job getting in shape. Once the shows are over with, off season, and then, okay, there's no more structure. I'm not tracking anything. I'm not accountable for anything. I'm just eating loosely and freely. And I would justify it because I would have really good workouts. Well, see this extra food, see my workouts, I'm crushing it. And then I would justify my t-shirts fitting tighter, like, okay, I'm getting bigger. It's like, yeah, you're getting bigger, but it's body fat than it is like actual muscle tissue. So usually with my athletes, once we're getting closer to the end of prep, I'm kind of reinforcing the habit conversation. Your habits are still in place. And if you've been tracking rigidly for 6 months to 9 months, 10 months for a contest prep, you got a pretty good idea of what food looks like and the amounts. So you've been putting that piece of chicken on a food scale for the last 6 months. It's been 6 to 8 ounces every time you do it. So I'm pretty confident you have the skills now to eyeball that. You don't need to actually put it on a food scale. You have the skills to now go into a restaurant and go, okay, that's about X amount of calories. And if you think from a health perspective too, because now that I'm older, I'm 55, in the last 5 years, I would say I've been in a perma prep lifestyle, meaning like my habits, I do contest prep is year round. The only difference is food levels. And my health, when I was 50, like I got diagnosed with high cholesterol, and I have my family history of heart disease. So I'm like, okay, I need to go away from like the traditional be 20 or 30 pounds over in the off season, have that I need to be bigger mindset, to now like I need to think about health first and foremost. And I think even for the younger people, it makes sense too, to have a health perspective on this. Like the things you do, whether you're prepping or you're in off season, it impacts your bottom line with your health, your longevity. And if you have like history of certain diseases and things like that, you definitely probably should take that into consideration. Because natural bodybuilding, we're supposed to be labeled as the healthy way to do things. Right. So I think, it's just having these habits in place and thinking from that perspective, it's helped me out personally a lot. Because now I'm not like putting my hand in the cookie jar, in between meals and things like that. So I'm like far healthier. And it makes the transition going from off season to prep a lot easier because the habits are the same. My body weight is not like way over. So it's like just a smoother and easier transition.
Yeah, and it's also about not making prep brutal again, right? It's like,
100%,
you have a brutal prep, you gain a ton of weight back, and then your next prep is going to be absolutely brutal again. So it's like setting yourself up to be in a better position for the next time you prep. And I definitely think people are starting to go that route a lot more. Before it was like, well, you've got to be 30 pounds above stage weight so that you're strong, so that you can grow and all that stuff. And it's like, well, maybe actually no, you don't, and maybe that's just justifying being sloppy with your diet, having more cheat meals or whatever, like you said, because you can justify it by saying, oh, my logbook's going up, my numbers are improving in the gym, I'm progressively overloading. It's like, well, you would probably still be doing those things even if you were eating clean less of a surplus. But we often know that too, because when we start prep, I actually feel almost my strongest. When I clean everything up, when I start, really saying, okay, my sleep's got to be dialed in. I actually feel like for the first, few weeks of prep, I feel incredible and strong, and I'm pushing numbers in the gym still. And it's only really when you maybe get down to like those last, 10 to 12 weeks or a bit less that you start to feel, I'm seeing a bit of a drop off in my strength, you know?
It might not even be like real strength loss anyway. It's probably more like relative strength, because what you're lifting at that lower body weight versus the higher body weight, it's pretty, like if you do a little basic math, it's pretty much the same, unless you're just losing strength every single week. That's where it's more of a red flag. But those are all like common things. Like your leverages will start shifting a little bit. You don't have as much food come in, obviously, so you might see some performance drop offs, but unless it's like dropping off every week, then I'm not usually concerned about those types of things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm like you. Like I have, like when I'm 15 over, I feel just as good, if not stronger, than when I was 30 pounds over stage weight.
Yeah.
And I can go up a flight of stairs a lot easier.
Yeah.
I think
a brutal set of hack squats isn't going to have you fighting for your life and winning, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and I think over the past few years, we've definitely seen an uptick in athletes taking more of an interest in their cardiovascular health and staying a little bit more in shape in off seasons. Because when you do get to those 30, 40, 50 pounds over your stage weight, you do start to see a drop off in how you feel through the day, lethargic and things like that. And it is important to pay attention to those factors. So it's cool to see the industry kind of shifting in that direction where people are thinking more health, long-term mindset. Because at the end of the day, like we're in natural bodybuilding to hopefully be able to do this as long as we want to do it, right? So we don't want to like age out of the sport because we haven't taken care of ourselves.
Yeah, I think I'm a pretty good example of how far you can take it. I mean, I'm in my mid 50s, and granted, I'm not building muscle at this point anymore, but I built this physique already to this point. So it's like I'm enjoying the fruits of the labor. I'm enjoying getting on stage still and competing on a decent level still. So it's definitely a long game. And I think sometimes when you're new, you're intermediate, you're short-minded. You're only going to think about tomorrow or the next 6 months. I want to get jacked. I want to get huge. You're in a rush. So you have those extremes where it's like gain a bunch of weight and you have to lose a bunch of weight. So you're getting those vicious cycles of going up and down. But if you stretch your timelines out, and if you think about your habits, this is what I always preach too, like bulking and cutting cycles. Like if it's really aggressive, think about what your habits are with that. Yeah. Pounding down a bunch of food. Sometimes people, they can't eat that much, so they have to resort to like, a little unhealthier types of foods. So it's just extreme, and your habits are extreme. But if you stretch your timelines out, so instead of going 30 up, 30 down, as an example number, maybe it's 15 up, 15 down. And you stretch the timeline. If it's the same timeline, well, now basically it's more conservative. So the stress levels are going to be a lot lower. Plus your habits are far better on both sides. So it's learning patience, I think, and just learning trajectory. That's something I try to teach my athletes first and foremost is like, what is the goal? Is it a realistic goal? Now, what is that timeline for the goal? What's that trajectory look like? And that sets the tone for the next year, 2 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jeff, so obviously, being 55, having been in the industry for a long time, I'm sure a lot of people look to you as their inspiration or their role model within the sport. Who inspired you? Who was your role model, or who is your role model today? And then what also motivates you? Because you just made the comment about, you're not building muscle at this point. So what continues to motivate you and drive you to continue to train the way you do and to continue to compete as well?
Like right now, I mean, my main motivations is my son. He's 13. So I can tell him something till I'm blue in the face. He might not be listening to it, but he sees what I do. So actions speak a lot louder than words. So he sees me on a daily basis. To him, it's like, oh, dad's in the garage training again. But that's planting seeds. Because he's seeing that I'm being productive. He sees, okay, if I am in prep and I am putting something on the food scale, it's like, okay, he's paying attention to the detail. So all these little things are planting seeds for him. So he motivates me, inspires me to keep doing what I'm doing. My family in general, my team, I mean, that goes without saying. But like looking at other bodybuilders like Marshall Johnson, I'm sure you guys have heard that name.
Oh, yeah.
Like he inspires the crap out of me because he's 10 years older than me, but yet he's still competing on a very high level. And I'm like, okay, if Marshall can do it, then why can't I?
Yeah.
And I competed against him back in 2014. And I remember, I'm like, oh man, I'm going to have to step on stage against this guy. And he was, at the time I was 43, he was like 53 or 54. And I'm like, okay, I might be able to beat him. And luckily he was a little bit off and I was on, so I edged him out. But he inspired me to level myself up, just because he's 10 years older, 10 years wiser. I'm like, let me follow. And he's obviously a terrific ambassador for this sport. He's a gentleman. He's humble. I'm like, this guy is like a role model. Like, I want to basically follow in his footsteps, because if he can do it, I can do it. And then whoever's kind of following me, it's like, okay, I'm just kind of using his example. And I just kind of keep paying it forward. So like, he's one of my natural bodybuilding inspirations. I also, like, back in the day, I was a big Dorian Yates fan when I first started training and all that, because I was a high intensity guy back in the day. I just felt like he was blue collar. Obviously his genetics are pretty damn good, but he's not like one of those blessed, pretty type bodybuilders. But he just took what he had and he worked his ass off, and he basically, like, he overcame a lot. And obviously he won 6 Olympics. So from that side of the sport, I look at him. I look at other sports now more than I do actual bodybuilding. I look and see what other sports are doing in regards to, like, how they get the most out of themselves. And that's where I've learned a lot about my own training. It's like going outside of the typical, like, let me look at the research and the science of training, or let me look at other bodybuilders. Like, if I look at, like, NBA basketball or football or these things, like, how are they performing on a high level? And what are they doing? So what they're really good at is managing fatigue. Yeah. Now NBA, like, players take games off. I know people get pissed off because of it, but I get why they're doing it. And as fans, it's upsetting. You pay, $200 for a ticket, and your favorite player is not playing that night. I get that part of it, but for them, that's how they're maximizing their performance and their longevity. So it's like, you look at NBA careers back then, way back when, to now, like, people are lasting longer. Now look at LeBron James. I know he's elite, but I mean, guy's going to be in his 24th season. It's like, what is he doing to keep himself on this level? He's managing his fatigue. He's managing his body well. So I try to mimic that, and I think that's why I'm still here 40 years later.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because, they get paid a lot of money, so people then just say they should be machines that never get hurt. They can turn, and it's like, the human body is the human body. Just because someone's making millions of dollars, it doesn't suddenly mean that they have the capacity to, compete weekly or bi-weekly, however many times a week or whatever. And it would be like, as a bodybuilder, someone saying, okay, I'm going to pay you millions of dollars, but you have to compete every single week for the next 5 years. Like, it's not going to happen physically. You couldn't, right? And obviously it's a different sport and whatever, but the point still remains. They're still humans. They still have to recover. So yeah, that's a great point.
That's the key word, is recovery. So in the bodybuilding world, it's like, oftentimes it preaches more is better, more volume, more gains. It's like, well, everybody has breaking points. So if you're always fatigued, you're not going to get as much performance. And sometimes when you're doing too much volume, when you're in the middle of something, and you kind of get, your judgment gets clouded because that's your environment. You've been in this environment for a prolonged period of time. So you start to get in a place where you can't really understand, like, what actually is better potentially or not better. You're just stuck in this limbo, and you're just doing the same things because people are telling you need to do more volume. It's not until you remove yourself from it, and sometimes people just, an injury, aches and pains, they stop training, they go on vacation for a week or two, they come back, and they're like, oh wow, I'm actually stronger now. It's like, well, you just reduced a lot of fatigue. Now you're expressing performance better. And when I look at NBA, the teams that play back-to-back games, they play 2 nights in a row. The second game, it's a lower winning percentage than the first night. Granted, now teams, some teams are better than others, whatever, but generally speaking, the winning percentage on the second night is much lower. It's like, why is that? It's like, one, maybe the star players aren't playing as much because they know it's too much fatigue, or they're playing, but they're just fatigued, so they're not getting as good performance out of them. So that's how I approach my training. It's like, okay, what can I do that's going to create a stimulus but not overwhelm myself where I can't recover from it?
Well, we talked about ego earlier, and I think that is also a part of it, right? Because people are wearing their Whoop bands or their Garmin's or their smartwatch, and their smartwatch is saying sleep was shit, and they're still like, well, I'm going to pop some pre-workout and just go and crush my legs anyway, and it's like, Okay, so now you're just burying yourself into a deeper hole that's going to take longer to recover from. And, your body is always giving you feedback. The key is, are you actually able to listen to it? Mm-hmm. Or are you just going to lead with your ego and bury yourself,
Yeah. That doesn't mean, you're not trying to strive to do more volume or to do more work or to put yourself more in the gym. Like, you should have that competitive drive, because that's what's obviously going to create more stimulus. But the key is you have to recover from it. And I think sometimes too, we just see this 7-day period, right? 7-day week. Everything's got to fit in this 7-day window. It's like the body doesn't know what day of the week it is. So your 6-day split doesn't have to be 6 days and 7 days. It could be 6 days and 8 days. It could be 6 days and 10 days. It could be 6 and 13. Yeah. So if you, like you said, if you're listening to your recovery, how your body's feeling, if you feel any type of resentment heading to a gym, or you have some aches and pains, what's wrong with taking an extra day off? It's like, if you take the day off, you eat super well, you get a good night's sleep, you're well hydrated, almost guarantee you the next day you're probably going to perform better than if you were to train in a fatigue state. So you're going to have a better stimulus. You can get more out of your training. It's the same thing with an NBA player. Like, okay, I'm going to take that second night off. I'm going to come back the next game. I'm going to crush it. I'm going to score 40 instead of scoring like 12 and have like 8 turnovers.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's all a rite of passage and like skin in the game. And the more experience you have as a bodybuilder, you start to be able to listen to your body and understand how those things operate and what you can recover from the longer you've done it. Jeff, so one thing I want to touch up on in terms of like your coaching style. So with obviously with social media, there's this instant gratification mindset nowadays, but bodybuilding is very much a long-term delayed gratification sport. How do you approach working with younger athletes that are in the social media realm where their expectations are very high? How do you coach and approach laying out like long-term progression goals for your athletes and setting expectations for them?
I usually start each new athlete with a video call. I like to meet face to face, and that can last anywhere between an hour to 2. I've had some calls go over 2 hours, sometimes 2.5. Just whatever it kind of takes to get to know the person, know their background, their context, to learn them as humans. Then my job is to try to create goals that are realistic, trajectory and timelines that are realistic, and protocols that are going to be practical and sustainable based off of their own context, their own lives. Because, I can set something up just as a template, but then that means they're going to have to conform to what I type up without understanding anything about them. May work, may not work, but chances are it's not going to work long term. And that's going to, once I get everything set up based on their context, then it's about actually now we got to let the rubber hit the road. Now you actually have to experience it. Okay, what works well, what doesn't work well, and we just keep evolving, making adjustments as needed over time. I could look back on my 40 years of training, and it hasn't been the same the whole way through. It's basically very dynamic, and like you kind of keep pointing out to, it's like, the deeper you get into this, more experience you gain, then you kind of learn more about yourself, and you learn how to auto-regulate yourself. But when you're new, it's always nice to have someone who has experience like we do to kind of help guide that, but it needs to be based off of like their needs. So that way, when you're coaching them, you can help make those informed adjustments for them. But eventually, you're teaching them, like every adjustment you do. Like I try to educate them. This is why we're going to make this adjustment. It's based off of like what just transpired, and in theory, this adjustment is probably going to have this as the outcome. May or may not happen, but this is what I think is going to happen based on these things. Then we play it out. If it does, great. If not, then we'll keep tweaking it. But you're educating them along the process. So eventually the end goal is to have them in a place where they're like us. We're like, okay, I can self-navigate myself. I got this. And the way I look at bodybuilding is kind of like martial arts. When you first start out, you're a white belt. And oftentimes, you guys probably felt the same way. Like you wanted to be a black belt tomorrow.
Yeah.
You want, if you're competitive, you're like, I want to win. I want a pro card. First show, I want to earn my pro card. It's like, well, slow down. You're a white belt. Let's maybe get yellow next time, and we'll go to blue, red. So that is just it evolves over time. And I think I try to educate my athletes about being humble, being patient, and it's a process. Or it's like you could look at it as a video game. You're trying to reach a level 100, but you're only at level 1. You got to master each level, and you can't waste all your lives on the first level because you still have 99 to go.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. I love that. Jeff, what do you see? Obviously we talked about over the last 5 to 10 years, natural bodybuilding has really kind of blown up. What do you think the future of natural bodybuilding looks like in Europe? Do you think it will just continue to grow from strength to strength? How do you think the federations might move? What's your take on that?
That's a great question. To be honest, I haven't really thought about it too much. I could see it continuing to grow. I love where it's at now. I mean, like I said, it's over 60 countries for the WWF World Championships. The talent level is insane.
Yeah.
I'll say 5 or 10 years from now, my hope anyways, is it just, it continues to grow. I think it will, just because of the internet, how fast it moves, the exposure. I think the natural federations are doing a little better job than they used to at promoting their athletes and promoting the federation, getting themselves out there more. And I think younger people seem to be taking notice of that. And you're like what I see, because like you said, I've been doing this since the early 90s. Even in like in the early 2000s, like you see a lot of like the WNBF like top guys. They're 30, they're in their 30s, 40s. On occasion you see a 50-year-old win a world championship. And back then I was like, oh, it's muscle maturity. But now you're seeing guys in their 20s, early 20s, even teens that are winning pro cards and looking hella jacked. You're like, what the hell? I'm like, why is that? Well, it's just because the information is right there at your fingertips. So they're getting exposed to education, the right education, much earlier on. So you're seeing more success earlier with these athletes. So those athletes, I mean, think about it, they're going to have now 30 years ahead of them to keep crushing it, killing it. And then the younger athletes that are coming up, I think you're going to see more of them. And you're going to see, like, there's still going to be a lot that gravitate towards the darker side of the sport. But I think that natural bodybuilding in the next 5 to 10 years, I think it's going to you're going to see younger athletes. There's going to be more of them on higher levels. That's what I think. That's my prediction.
Yeah, I agree. We've seen teams on stage that are like
ridiculous.
Yeah.
Makes me want to retire. I'm like, man, okay. I think I'm just going to stay in the master's class now. Like these guys.
Right, yeah.
Well, as it gets more exposure, you get more genetic freaks, that maybe didn't quite go as far as they wanted to in college football or any, some form of athletics in college, and they get into bodybuilding and they're hyper responders,
Yeah. What I would like to see from the federations, and I know this is I probably don't have enough education and I don't know enough on the backside of what they do, but if prize money gets raised, if these shows become even more prestigious, and people are going to want to stay within natural bodybuilding, because I think sometimes people they go as far as they can go, and they're like, well, I've been doing this for 10 years, my physique's not getting that much bigger, prize money's not all that much or whatever, they're not getting the notoriety, so they turn to the other side of the sport thinking there's more room to grow, like a ceiling there. So I would love to see the federations maybe get to a point where it's like the prize money is pretty hefty, and it's giving more incentive for people to stay natural more long term. That's what I would like to see. Because I'm an example of like what you can do naturally. Yeah, granted, I'm not a freak of nature, but at 55, I'm still holding my own against some of the best in the world, and I have my health intact, and I can stand, and I feel like I can keep going. Marshall Johnson, 64 years old, he's still crushing.
Yeah, that's the beauty of natural bodybuilding.
Yeah.
Application, just buying into the process.
Well,
Jeff, this has been great. This is all we have time for today, but really appreciate you jumping on with us. I know you're busy with business, family, and in contest prep yourself, but we really appreciate you jumping on so the viewers could hear your story and share some wisdom about your time in natural bodybuilding, man.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff, and all the best with your season, man.
Thank you. Thanks.